All right, so please welcome Brian Peretti, Esquire, Deputy Chief AI Officer and Director, Domestic and International Cybersecurity Policy, Department of Treasury, and our panel moderator, Mark Abramowitz, Senior Vice President of Product and Solutions Marketing.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Steve. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Brian, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
Let's have a seat.
Oh,
and so,
goodness.
we're going to have a conversation here around, how we're looking at and how the federal government is looking at some of the AI executive order, as well as some of the guidance and guidelines that are coming out. And so, but first, what I thought I would do is just ask Brian to give us a quick introduction about his role and what's top of mind right now for him.
Sure. So hi, I'm Brian Peretti. First, thanks for having me here. Really appreciate coming to events like this. I think we really always learn more than what I speak about. So it's really good to be able to talk to folks to understand how practitioners are really addressing some of these issues. I have two main roles and a third role at Treasury. One, I'm the Deputy Chief AI Officer, a role that was just created out of the executive order that was released October 30th, and it will be solidified once OMB guidance comes out, hopefully a little later this month. The second role is the Director for Domestic and International Cyber Policy, so working on figuring out how we can align both our domestic and international components, especially in this area of response, recovery, incident management, and also development of normal policy going forward. And the third, I'm the U.S. subject matter expert on cyber to the Group of Seven Cyber Expert Group, which is a group of the Group of Seven, which we get together to talk about how to better align efforts in cyber policy and response mechanisms across not only the G7, but the broader community. You may have seen earlier this week, we released an MOU between us and Finland to increase information sharing. And what we've been trying to do is figure out how we can get more of the information into the hands of the network defenders. Hopefully many of you out there, whether it's tied to AI, incident response, cyber, whatever, to be able to make sure that you have what you need to be able to do what your job is more efficiently and effectively to protect this system that we call the financial system, to get to be able to make sure it can deliver what it needs to do, what your customers need, what your users always need at that point. So really excited to be here and talk about some of these and some other issues. So thanks.
So I guess my takeaway there is, wow, that's a broad set of responsibilities and only so many hours in a day.
It impresses my mother, not so much my mother-in-law too much, but
I'm gonna avoid. I'm not gonna dive into that right now. Okay, so the White House's AI executive order, right, directs the Secretary of Treasury within about 150 days to issue a public report on the best practices for financial services and financial institutions about how they're going to manage their AI-specific cybersecurity and risks. And so it's something that this falls directly into your world. Love to hear how that's going and give us an update on what you're thinking.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll be done shortly. It's due, it all depends, it's either Wednesday or Friday of next week. So we're still in that crunch time getting everything done. What we did was about a year ago, we released a report on cloud to be able to understand how cloud was being used in the financial sector. As the area of AI was bubbling up more and more, the White House said, you did a good job there. As we know, no good deed goes unpunished. So they decided to assign us a report to understand how AI is working within the financial sector, some of the concerns out there, how it's being deployed, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities going forward. So we interviewed about 42 different stakeholders, financial firms from very large institutions to small community banks, outside providers, getting a good understanding of what they're looking at in this space, what we can be thinking of how to develop areas better going forward. I think a couple of things we found out. One, there's no new risk that's as I identified because of AI. It's basically the current risk that's out there is still out there, right? People still try to rob banks, but AI just gives a different potential vector. So there may be different ways to be able to try to get to that same risk, but we still have to figure out how to make those risk mitigation techniques better based upon the environment we're in. That evolution is going to be really critical. The second one is, from what we know, almost nobody knows what the word AI means. We hear a lot of different people calling it different things, and so even creating a lexicon that we can talk about to be able to make sure that we're saying the same things in the same way is going to be critical. Third area, governance. How do we make sure that we're able to be able to understand what's happening, that firms understand what's happening, how they're deploying it, how they're using it, to really be able to understand the maximum ways to do that and the best ways to mitigate whatever those challenges that are coming forward. And then finally, I just mentioned that there's definitely a data divide between small and large firms, right? If you have a big data set, you're able to do a lot to create your models and manage those models. If you're on the smaller side, you may not have enough information to really make it more robust. But we know the bad guys either way are going to be targeting you, right? This is a key area to maybe get some fraud to make some money off it. So what we're going to have to do is figure out how to build this together to be able to make sure we're in a much more robust way to be able to target these fraud vectors coming through, to get best information to help them prevent the bad guys from winning. So as we continue down this path, we'll create some work streams to try to tackle some of these and some of the other large challenges, and making sure that we're doing something that hopefully increases all of your confidence in the financial system, and also hopefully bleed over into some other sectors to help them be able to learn from our good deeds.
So thanks, Brian. One of the things you touched on a little earlier as you were in exec circle was the way you described, like, everyone, like, people have always been trying to rob banks, right? But the way you do that has changed, and looking at a little bit more around, it's not so much the risk, but these are your words, opportunity versus challenge. And maybe just if you could elaborate on that a little bit for this audience.
Yeah, so one of the things we did, we did a hard dive to figure out what are the new risks that exist. We did this when we did the cloud report a year ago, when we did AI, trying to understand what is the new risk out there. And we just didn't find any new risk. We didn't, in fact, come up with anything that was unique, different than what the current challenges that banks are facing, financial institutions, or you are facing on a daily basis, right? People are trying to steal information. They're trying to use insider threat to cause problems. They're doing spear phishing, right? AI may amplify that, right? We see that on the bad side, better spear phishing attacks coming through because AI is doing a better job. We're also seeing on the positive side, models are being trained better to prevent that. So your firewalls are much more better. They can be uploaded and fixed in real time to be able to get that without that human interaction to some extent. Now, that doesn't mean you take the human out altogether. The CEO of NVIDIA just yesterday was saying AI just changes the way in which you're in charge, right? You may be able to move resources from here to there, but you still need to have a human in that place, because if you don't, these areas may do stuff that is not what you originally planned. So how do you then retrain your workforce to get to a place in which maybe you don't need somebody who drafts a document as the first line, but you need somebody, say, as a copy editor to make sure the output from a ChatGPT, OpenAI, something like that, is not incorrect, right? So it's a different skill set. How do we merge them to understand and train personnel to not make sure we have this huge workforce divide that we've had in some other areas where we just don't have enough personnel?
Thank you. I think that's pretty insightful. Just thinking through the changing, or the technology changes, but the goals of bad actors really haven't changed. And the sophistication grows on both sides, both on the offense and the defense. And so, just changing topics a little bit here, but still sticking with the White House's AI executive order. Is this order, directs the OMB to issue guidance to agencies again within 150 days, which is just around the corner, as you mentioned, to strengthen the effective and sort of the appropriate use of AI in AI innovation, and managing risks from that in the federal government. And so, again, just looking to get your perspective on how that is going. Is this also is something that you must be actively working on right now?
Yeah, so this is keeping me busy. One of the things that really came out, or at least once again, the guidance isn't finalized. It'll be coming out shortly. But at least if everybody's seen it, the draft guidance came out November 1st for open period of comment. And so some of the things that are going to be required, we need to have a chief AI officer, right? Somebody who owns this risk, who understands this risk, who is able to really be an advocate both on the positive and negative side of AI, so that the government agency is able to really understand the challenge and maximize as much as possible. They also have to create a governance board chaired by the deputy secretary of the department or agency, and also with the chief AI officer as the vice chair, I'll be the deputy in that, probably making sure a lot of this runs really smoothly going forward. But then understanding how these use cases are across all the different departments and agencies. So, for example, you may have seen as we were doing the internal review of our stuff, we had to publish this and send it over to OMB. But just 2 weeks ago, we came out with, because of AI and the deployment of AI in one of our areas, we saved about $375 million from fraud, reducing fraud losses. And what we're seeing is in the private sector, similar issues in which some firms have said they've been able to drastically reduce the fraud losses by deploying AI, really being able to spot the bad actors quickly and be able to shut down the schemes that they have within organizations before they can really maximize it. So as we're looking at this, trying to understand, right, where can we really maximize the use of AI to be able to prevent bad things from happening, be able to spot trends before they exist, and if we do it the right way, hopefully maximize the user experience with Treasury. I know everybody here loves IRS. If we can make that engagement much smoother, you can imagine that could be very beneficial, especially if you're on the government benefit receiving side. My mother, my mother-in-law both receive Social Security. They would get that check maybe in a better way without as much interaction as may have been in the past. So trying to think how we can kind of work to be able to get to a better spot in this area. We also have some other roles that we have to do, hopefully if it comes out the same way, regarding oversight of AI deployment within the organization, understanding exactly what's going on. But I think the most important thing, and I would say to everybody here the same way, that governance board is really going to be critical. How do we make sure that we have about 100,000 people within Treasury? How do we make sure all those different vast components that are all across the country and overseas are connected together? If somebody's deploying AI, that use case is going to be shared across the whole organization. And if somebody else can use it, they'll also be able to pick it up easily. Or if one of our other parts of the federal government is using something and has a good technique or a deployment of AI that may be helpful for us, how can we bring that in-house to be able to get this to a better spot? It's a challenge we're always going to have. Information sharing is never really perfect, but it could be a way in which we could really maximize the use. Once again, there are challenges, and the key, I think, in this place is also to be able to understand where those challenges manifest and how they've been able to overcome those, right? The risk mitigation strategies we used, how do we make sure we continue to modify and continue to go down that path? As you mentioned, people have been robbing banks for 600 plus years. They're going to keep doing that. How do we think about how the new vectors, the new ways they're going to do that to go after that? But the challenge we keep, and coming back to the point, yeah, right? Risk is always there, right? It's how we manage it, how we mitigate it, how we exploit it for our benefit. How do we go down that path? AI is not good or bad. It's just there. How do we use it in the right way to get to the right spot? A challenge, and that's where we hope we engage with a lot of you all going forward to understand what you're doing, how you're tackling it. And honestly, if there's any materials you think we should be reading, please send it over to us. Love to read. Love to read.
So thanks, Brian. I think the two minor points there. Just I actually had a really good IRS.gov digital experience recently, which was very hard, actually, like very refreshing. But two, you mentioned a little bit about fraud detection, which is clearly part of some of the outcome of being able to use AI more consistently across these segmented or private data sets. And so I think it's interesting also how the private sector and the public sector have an opportunity here, I think, to work together, particularly on fraud detection, disputes management, and really thinking about how AI can anticipate, can get ahead, as well as be more than proactive, but take action necessarily that is well thought through. And so I think that's just a terrific use case to be thinking about. And just to sort of transition to use cases, right? I understand that most federal agencies have their use cases are sort of in pre-production or not even there, and just in the planning phase. And so if you had some advice or words of wisdom, what do your departments need to do to kind of move that forward into something that is in production?
I think that the challenge is really to understand in a really nuanced way what problem you're trying to solution for, and then being able to build the AI platform and strategy around that. A lot of times you try to boil the ocean and you try to create something that's going to solve all the world's problems. It's probably not going to work. right? So how do we kind of think about those small areas? Those
So
nuanced
scope it appropriately.
Scope it is really critical. Without that, you don't have mission creep. You just have creep all over the place, in which you don't get it, and then you get frustrated, right? People get frustrated on that space. So how do we make sure we're identifying just the nuanced areas where we can hit AI with, and then also from there, from the success, build out, right? If it's worked here, why did it work here? And then how can we build that to the next space and go forward? So if we can do that, right, and understand what that is, and hopefully you all do that within your day job as you're deploying AI, we have better understanding, and then we can start sharing some of those best practices, which is going to be the key. If we all try to develop this all on our own, not going to be helpful, but where there are wins out there, where there's successes, let's publicize them, let's talk about them, let's share them, and then we'll be able to then go down the next path of getting them even better, but also removing those obstacles, the impediments that don't allow us to get to maximum efficiency going forward.
So just to quick, that scope matters, right? And being very discreet about the problem you're trying to solve. But also once the problem is solved, let's share it amongst agencies and different missions, but also I would say between the private and public sector, and an opportunity for all of us to learn.
Yeah.
And so
one of the things I'll just mention within our report we're publishing, part of it is also to share best practices. So what we've already learned that's been successful. And what we're going to do is engage in a public-private partner dialogue to start talking about that. How can firms in the financial sector and other places really start to create vectors to share, right? And so if you imagine you're a chief risk officer, you're a CIO, you're a CISO, you already have those areas, right? Those places where you can come together. How do we create an environment where chief AI officers can come together to share that stuff, to go to cocktail parties, to go to events like this or other ones, to really be able to start to talk about some of the benefits they found, some of the challenges they have, and then hopefully talk about how things were better at the end of the day. So it's going to be interesting, be an interesting journey, and excited for it.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time, and I think that's a great way to actually wrap up this conversation. We are out of time, and so I would just like to thank you, Brian, for spending most of the day with us here at Federal Forum. And I'm going to turn it back over to Steve at this point and continue with the program.